and the kids are not lost, right? Because, you know, all you need to do is set foot inside a Comic-Con.
Very intelligent.
Yeah. And you know, all you got to do is just set foot inside a Comic-Con, and there's communities of kids who find the one thing that they like. They cosplay. They chew up and eat up anime like a lawnmower now. You know what I mean? To the point where they study Japanese, or they know how to sing the song in Japanese with flawless diction. You know what I mean? So, you know, the comic book kids are still comic book kids the same way we were. So, you know, society's not lost. It's just, you know, there are some worrisome things that are at play. I hate to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but, you know, there are legit forces, like actual forces at play, that if people don't know how to, or learn how to, or exercise their ability to have a little bit of discretion around what they do, how much they consume. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't, and that was the thing that the book that I mentioned sort of is resolving itself to. I'm still reading it, but I can tell it's resolving itself to, you know, you have to exercise a certain amount of discipline and discretion in terms of A, how much you consume, B, the way that you're consuming it, C, the vehicle that you're consuming it through, and then D, being able to disengage.
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
Welcome, everybody, to Blerdlines. It's your man, Cam. With me, as always, is...
Cam Bigelow in the flesh.
As well as...
Josh playing the role of Headless Horseman today.
And as always...
It's the professor, here to educate, but fun fact, I don't care.
And we're back talking, actually, you know what? Talking pretty much anything that we want. We don't really have anything specific, you know, to say. I think everyone's been watching a lot of different things, a mix of horror, action, anime, you know, dramas, that kind of thing, sci-fi as well, which is kind of on par for all of us. But I thought for this one particularly, we were just kind of like throwing out different topics. People are going to talk about what they've been watching. Some of us have watched the same thing. Some of us haven't. But it's been kind of cool too, because as each one of us watch something, we kind of recommend to each other, like, oh, you should check this out. I'm a season in now. Now you can go check it out. Also too, yes, we've heard that we should go watch Severance. That's on the list. Just want to put that out there so everyone knows. And then the last piece of housekeeping is, we're on YouTube. Go subscribe, like, you know, notification, all the things, do all the things. But first up, D'Angelo, I know you, Black Mirror just dropped Friday, so about 2 days ago. I think all the episodes are up.
Yeah, Netflix is never I don't think they've ever deviated from their release all of their episodes with all their shows. But yeah, they released all 7 episodes on April 10th, which, if I'm not mistaken, was Thursday, perhaps, or Friday. But yeah, 7 episodes. It's anthology, obviously. So each episode is like a mini movie more than it is a traditional TV episode. But I think they run for about, on average, 50 to 65 minutes. But there were some really good ones. And for those of you who might not be familiar with Black Mirror, it started off as a British anthology that kind of, I guess, to sum it up, it critiques, evaluates our relationships with technology. So the Black Mirror that's referred to is the screen here. But there was a couple standouts. My favorite this time around was one called Plaything, which it starred Peter Capaldi, who, for a lot of you science fiction folks, know as I don't know which doctor. Josh, chime in. Which one was he?
He is is he the 12th or 13th Doctor? Somewhere thereabout.
Yeah. So he's been I brought that up because one of the other things that Black Mirror has been really good with is bringing in a lot of familiar faces from the sci-fi genre across the board familiar faces who've been involved for many, many years, and even some new faces that haven't traditionally been involved in any kind of sci-fi storytelling on TV or film, such as Issa Rae, who was in an episode called Hotel Reverie. The Plaything, starring Peter Capaldi, is about it's set in the 90s. It's set in the future, but the main character tells a story from the 90s when he murdered another man, and they've now found him with the body of that man in the suitcase that he kept it in. I don't want to give too much away, but it's a story that both, kind of evaluates our relationship with technology, but also the nature of humanity in general and how our emotions play a role in the decisions we make and how we view lesser life forms in general and how we treat them. So the whole thing is that there's actually Will Poulter is in it, and he reprises his character from Bandersnatch, which was set in 1984, and they kind of follow up that the character after that story had spent some time in a mental institution, which would make sense in a meta way because that episode was interactive and the audience got a chance to play around with the characters and make them do different things. And some of those outcomes led to them dying and all kind of stuff. So from a metafiction perspective, again, it's if you know, if you've been watching, I think, Cam, you asked me earlier, do you need to see previous Black Mirror episodes? And I would say you probably don't to enjoy what you're seeing in that story for some, but it is helpful to watch some of the previous episodes to see the evolution of the tech and how it's impacting the characters and this world, because they go around from past to present to future. And each time it shows more of as we evolve with the tech, we sort of regress to our more primitive selves in terms of our behavior.
I was going to say, I am familiar with Black Mirror, and I was trying to think of the last one, and I was like, is it Bandicoot? Bandersnatch.
Oh, yeah.
Shout out to Crash Bandicoot, PS game. But Bandersnatch, that was the one which it turned either a lot of people onto it or off, because some people didn't like that.
Absolutely. I didn't like it, but it was a good thing that I think brought in some new viewers for because it was a special. And it wasn't like connected to any of the seasons, but I didn't personally like it. But I know I talked to some people, and you're right. It was a very mixed bag. Either you loved it or you really didn't like it at all.
I remember, like you said, people have standout episodes. I just remember what was trending was the Anthony Mackie episode for whatever. I have not watched it, but I know it was like some crazy scene. But a lot of people were memeing that when that episode came out. And so it kind of got my attention as a show I needed to watch. And I did watch it. I did enjoy it. And the segue to that, this reminds me of another show to watch, not to get off topic, but Pantheon has the kind of the same dealings with technology and morality of a lesser species and whatnot. But it doesn't deal with the Black Mirror per se, but it has similar themes. So in accordance to Black Mirror, I implore people to check out Pantheon, which is 2 seasons and it's an animation, but it's got similar themes. But going back to Black Mirror, it's good to know that I do not have to watch previous seasons, although I will go back and pretty much take a refresher course, because in my opinion, for majority of the case of this whole series, I don't think there's like bad episodes. Like you can watch this and not feel like I shouldn't watch this season.
Well, I would say that yes and no. I think the last season didn't have as many good episodes, strong episodes with its engagement of how it's looking at our relationship with emerging in past and present technology. There was a lot of people were confused because there was now the supernatural was involved and different things like that. So I didn't personally, there was only one real standout in that season, and that was the one that featured Josh Hartnett and Aaron Paul. I can't remember the name of it, but it was one where they were in space, and it was really, really, really good. Beyond the Sea. And it was about, an alternate 1969 where these astronauts transfer their consciousness into Avatar. They're physically not on Earth, but they can each night transfer their consciousness to an avatar that's with their family and spending time so that they're not, and it allows their consciousness to not feel the sort of depressing weight of the nothingness of space. And it takes a very dramatic and twisty turn with how when you add the human condition to this tech. It's benign at first, but when then you involve the way that we behave, then it turns the technology into something more sinister. And I think that's been the best part of the Black Mirror experience overall. I personally love stories where the protagonist is either range from anti-hero to protagonist villain, but most all of the Black Mirror, especially in the early episodes, which I think is why they were so stronger, either had a protagonist villain or someone who was not the traditional protagonist, in that as you watch their story, you adapt their way of thinking. I think as a device, it makes you challenge the way you interact with the Black Mirror. And so that's what's been strongest about it. So going back to my thoughts on season 7, as I said, Playthings was stood out. There's one called Bête Noire, where a character has the ability to alter reality through a specific tech. So each season, they're growing more and more with this concept of what can possibly be done with human innovation. And I think this season specifically, they tried to find different ways that AI is now involved. Before, AI was there, but it wasn't sort of zeroed in on as being potentially dangerous. But now that's what some of these stories kind of focused on, the sort of danger of an AI that is constantly learning, constantly adapting, and constantly evolving at a faster rate than humanity. So again, that's sort of the overall thing, but I highly recommend watching all of them. There's 7 episodes this season. The one that I was particularly looking forward to, which was a follow-up to, I think, one of the season 4 really good episodes, which was USS Callister. So this one was USS Callister into Infinity.
Nice.
And for all of us Trek fans, USS Callister was really good, starring Jesse Plemons, Kristen Melody, who's now even more popular than she was at the time when the first one was released. Jimmy Simpson, who's, most of us know him from Westworld. And if you watched It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. But so they all returned and reprised their role. And they even show this has a more ethical conversation where you have these digital clones that were created and they are sentient and they exist in the cloud, and all the gamers are trying to kill them. And the CEO is trying to prevent their discovery because the technology to clone a consciousness was outlawed and is illegal. So they present these real world ethical dilemmas that are centered around our use of technology.
Yeah, I liked, for me, it's like, I haven't watched this season yet, but what I liked about Black Mirror, because it brought back the same level of Outer Limits.
Yes.
that anthology show. Where
Very much.
Twilight Zone had a very specific type of thing, but then Outer Limits kind of expanded on that. Like Outer Limits was basically Twilight Zone, but then they expanded on what they would focus on. So it could be anything from, it would start in sci-fi, but it could go veer into fantasy, it could veer into thriller, spy, horror, this and that. And so my dad is a really big fan of Outer Limits and Twilight Zone, as well as the short-lived but also awesome Friday the 13th.
Oh yes, talk about anthologies that were this cult classic now, but Friday the 13th, not to be confused with the
franchise.
Although I do believe Sean S. Cunningham was a producer.
Okay. That's why I was wondering why. That's the only thing I didn't get. I didn't understand why it was called that. But then I just watched that. And for someone like me that's not a fan of like the horror genre, like I watched Friday the 13th because it had just enough horror, but it wasn't all the way. It was more on psychological thriller or more of the human condition. And so it just had those interesting types of themes. And Black Mirror, those first three actually, had that same type of feel. And that's something that really drew me in. And I really
liked that. That's a good comparison because the whole thing was that it was drawn around a theme, right? Which is Friday the 13th, which evokes the sort of bad luck, Black Friday, the history
bad juju,
Black Pope, and all of that stuff, depending on how deep you go with your history. Bad day, and then you had the connection to Jason. So that all played in sort of theming around it, and that's how Black Mirror has created a very interesting world in which they can tell all these different stories. That's what I love about it, is that you can tell a season of stories and then you can revisit that. You don't have to watch every single Black Mirror episode to get into, but if you're going to watch USS Callister into infinity, you should watch USS Callister, the first one, because it's just part of that overall experience, but none of it is contingent on that, and that's what makes it work so well.
I mean, I felt like the McAllister episode, of the episodes that I've seen, because I'm not up to date, but thus far that was one of the best episodes of the series, in my opinion.
He's biased because he's a super duper Trek fan. So
of course I am. That was what I was saying. I thought that was what I was saying. Yeah.
I was gonna say surprise. surprise.
Right. Yeah. So low hanging right there, but I just had to say it. But no, he's right though. As a Trek fan, and what it really did was it challenged the sort of the zeitgeist around the original Star Trek series, right? And that it's supposed to have been this progressive storytelling, and yet it's still very male dominated and about the male gaze, and sort of the inverse of that, where you have this captain who is the total opposite of Kirk, selfish, evil, incredibly capricious, and with a God complex. And that makes that whole scenario, the whole setup, very much frightening. And that's Black Mirror's strength, is taking these things that I think we have with us every day and that are part of our lives, and turning it into something that's very frightening in a real way. One last example is from the first episode, which is Commonplace, which I made the mistake of watching first. I'm not saying that because it was bad, but whoa. it ends and it's not happy. So and Black Mirror does that, but man, this was something. But anyway, there's a moment. Basically, the gist is husband and wife. The wife gets an inoperable brain tumor. So in order to save her life, they reroute her brain. The brain is technically an organic machine.
Pause. This is the one with Tracy.
Yes.
Ross. Okay.
Tracy
I was like, okay. Yeah.
Tracy Ellis Ross basically plays the main antagonist as the representative of this company. And I'm blanking. Oh, it's called Rivermind is what they call the tech. And basically what it is they put a certain type of technology in your brain that takes that storage that we don't use and gets it to work your cognition away from whatever the tumor was. Or it's very, I can't explain it. You have to watch it to really understand it. But I brought it up because once that happens, they start to, it's just like being on a streaming plan, like how Peacock and Hulu and all exist, where we were all on it and it was free, no ads and all, I mean, not free, but a low price, no ads and all stuff. Then all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, you can get rid of the ads, but you got to upgrade to the premium. And so they kept doing that to her. She couldn't go out a certain distance where they didn't have towers like a cell phone tower, or she would just shut down. And then the funniest thing is that she started to speak ads. And they like literally she would be in mid thought and then just go into an ad, similar to how you could be watching a YouTube video and boom, an ad will pop up. And again, very grounded in a way that resonates with how we are engaged with reality and the technology right now. And that's what makes it so potent. And that's what I thought made it pretty. The moments were funny, but then they stopped being funny, because if you start, put yourself in that shoes, in that space and say, hey, how would that be? One day your life is fine, and then the next you're relying on this technology that is tied to big business and all these various interests. And, again, so all these parallels to the real world is not just about the technology itself, but it's about how we exist and incorporate the technology. And they do that well. So highly recommend season 7. Playthings is a really good one. Do not watch Commonplace or Playthings first. If you're going to start with USS Callister and work your way down.
And then Cam, you've been watching another show, Interview with the Vampire, on AMC Plus, or it's from AMC, but it's on various of the pieces on one season's on one streaming, another season's on another. But you're watching it recently. It's one of those things that I know it's there. It's something that I want to watch eventually. I just never got around to it. And then, like, when you mentioned it, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that's still on. So, but it has Grey Worm from Game of Thrones, and but it also basically, we are familiar with Interview with Vampire with the Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise joint, but this is not that at all, and it's a little bit more true to the book. But how did you, now that you're like about a season in, like what was your take on it?
So I'm first and foremost, I love good vampire flicks, shows, series, whatever. And I am far removed from reading Anne Rice's material, Vampire, Queen of the Dam, Interview with the Vampire, and the one where they talk about Vampire Armand. But I
think there's the Vampire Lestat as well.
Yeah, I didn't read Vampire Lestat, but you put me onto this show because we both have a soft spot for good vampire flicks and horror flicks in general. And I caught it, and I didn't have any expectations of the show. And when I started watching it, I was like, oh, this is very interesting. And the first thing that comes to mind is that they do exemplify the homoeroticism of the vampires. You didn't get that in the movie. You do get that sense in the book a little bit, but they only hinted at in the more famous movie that everybody's familiar with. The funny part about this, you mentioned one of the main actors, the one that plays Louis, is Jacob Anderson, which is a complete role switch from Brad Pitt. Goes from white guy to black guy. I'm surprised I didn't hear any hoopla over this. Like,
there was.
So I missed it. All right.
It wasn't that loud, and most people were like, nah.
Yeah, okay. So again, it's not important. He does a really good job of playing Louis Dupont de Loc, which was Brad Pitt's character in the movie. They have this actor, his name is Eric Bogosian. He kind of looks like what's the chef that passed away? Kitchen Confidential.
Anthony Bourdain.
Dude, he looks just like Anthony Bourdain. Sounds like Anthony Bourdain. I was like, they get Anthony Bourdain to play this guy. So he reprises his role as Daniel Malloy. I think that was played by, I want to say, what's his name? Slater in the movie. But it's a continuation of their last interview years later from the movie when he gets bit or almost gets bitten and whatnot. But it's pretty cool to see them kind of retell what had happened between the relationship between Louis and Lestat and Claudia in season 1. Cam had mentioned there's a season 2. I didn't know there was a season. I knew there was a season 2, but I didn't think it was out. But this show did come out in 2022. And I think in season 2, the actress that plays Claudia, who her name is Bailey Bass, she got replaced by another woman actor, Delaney Hayles. I haven't watched the second season yet, but from what I've been reading is that the second actress does a better job of playing Claudia. And we get to see the dynamic between Lestat, Louis, and Claudia coming to grips. Well, she's coming to grips with her being a vampire and never being a full woman and experiencing all of these things because she's forever 14 in the eyes of the humans, right? And she kind of has a resentment towards the two main vampires, which is basically she looks at Lestat as her uncle, which he is our creator, and Louis as her father. But the dynamics changed throughout the season, where she looks at Louis as a brother because of his own family dynamic of him coming to grips that his family kind of knows that that's not Louis. They don't know he's a vampire. They think they obviously know that he's gay. And in this time period, it was against the law to have queer interactions or be outed as gay. And so they actually had to obviously cover that up within society. And I think this was in New Orleans.
And they don't ignore the fact that he is now Black, right? So it's not just in this case, in this version of the story, it's not just that he is homosexual, but also that he is a Black man living in Louisiana in post-Civil War.
And there's a particular scene where they're out on a night gallivanting and they go to the opera. And this was Lestat's gift to Louis because Lestat wants to believe that he is of a cultured past, which he is. And when they walked into the theater, Louis had to walk behind Lestat and act like a butler. And when he came to his seat, he stood up behind him because that was the protocol back then. And when the lights went out, then he was seated and they could both enjoy the show. Now, they highlight these things, which it kind of takes you out of them being vampires to understand that they can't be outed not only as vampires, but queer vampires, but also the cultural and systematic dynamic within that time frame. So they hit you on
a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. There's layers to that. It's not just a vampire show.
Because as vampires, they are a species, right?
Yes.
Which means that if humans were to discover they existed, most likely we would wipe them out because we don't like any challenges to our policies on this planet. So that dynamic is there, but it's so unspoken. And that's what I loved about Anne Rice's storytelling.
Yeah. So overall, again, it's one of these things where it touches on societal things. It touches on the coming to grips of what they truly are and the human nature, especially with Louis' part, because it's two timelines. You got the present where Malloy's interviewing Louis again, and the past where we're trying to understand how did Louis become Louis. Lestat's always been Lestat throughout this, right? The other part of this is there have been some changes to some things where Vampire Armand is being revealed. And it was some things that I didn't understand.
Can I say something really quick?
Yeah.
Just about, you had mentioned the fact that Lestat was always Lestat. I think by that point in the Immortal universe, Lestat had become that, but he is implied, much like Louis, to have been different in both in life and in his initial after being turned, right?
Fair.
So, yeah,
I say Lestat being Lestat is that if you're familiar with the movie,
absolutely. Like
this
at
Lestat is no
that
different.
point, he's a degenerate. He's like, I'm immortal. I can do whatever I want. Like he is the archetypical vampire.
Yes, every vampire, if you read the story or familiar with the work, they were once somebody else, and then when they became a vampire, they became something else.
But it takes time, though, and that's the whole thing. Like they live for centuries, and then over that time, they become much different than they were when they walked and lived as humans.
Correct. Now, the one thing I don't remember was that, according to this series, certain vampires of a certain age can actually be out in the daylight. Vampire Armand, I don't know if this is part of Anne Rice's lore, but there is a particular scene where Vampire Armand goes out into the day. We don't know he's Vampire Armand, but he's doing something in the daylight. And there was a scene between Malloy and Armand, and he asked him, he was like, oh, because he's starting to put two and two together between this one character. And he was like, you drank the blood of one person, he almost couldn't stand, and he weighs much more than this guy, and he's standing. And I was like, and he put two together. He was like, hold on, you're a vampire. He was like, how are you able to go out in the daylight? He was like, well, at my age, vampire, the sun doesn't affect me. I did not know that part of the lore. I don't remember that part of Anne Rice. I don't know if this is something new. I have to go back to the source material. But that was a nice little or interesting little tidbit. And I was like, oh, maybe if you're very, very old and very, very powerful, you can withstand the sun for so long.
Now, is that something that's specific to Interview with a Vampire lore, or is that like general vampire?
That I have to revisit. I don't remember.
Nah, that's not. Well, so, okay. Each vampire lore since Dracula and even before that, Sheridan Le Fanu's Camilla has been different and based in various myths, right? So Dracula could walk in the day, but there was not, it wasn't just that he could just walk around and cruise in the day. A lot of times there was magic and sorcery involved, right?
Okay.
Like whenever Dracula wanted to move during the day, it was usually an overcast or cloudy or something that blotted out the sun for him to do that. In fact, the final scene when he's running from Van Helsing and all of the hunters, he actually casts a spell and you see the dark cloud move in front of in fact, they showed it in Bram Stoker's Dracula and Francis Ford Coppola's film. But I don't know if that's the case. That sounds like it could be something that they drew from the mythology. And given that it would only likely be a few vampires that live to be Armand's age, it could be possible. But I do know that in every vampire lore, the older the vampire is, there's some kind of thing. So like in the Charmaine Harris, for example, the True Blood series, the older you are, the more powerful you are. That's traditionally the thing, is that by age, if you are a 500-year-old vampire, you have no shot against an 1,000-year-old vampire. You just don't. They'll take you out like that. That's the first time I've heard of it being that they can walk in the day. Usually any mythology where a vampire can walk in the day and they're that old, it's because they're using some kind of magic or sorcery.
And until I watch season 2, I don't know if they're going to expound on that, or I start going down the wiki rabbit hole about this particular Armand incarnation, that how powerful he is. But yes, the lore, the older you are, the more powerful vampire you are. But nowhere I've read or heard anything again about Armand being able to walk in the sun. And I don't know if this is for a limited time or he doesn't burn as crispy. Like, could he walk out with like wearing all black and then have a hat to cover himself in the sun type of deal? Or if his like exposure to the sun burns him like it burns Louis, because Louis stuck his arm in the sun and it would start to fry instantly. He's several hundred years old. So I don't know. And Lestat can't walk out in the sun, but Armand could. So that's one of those things that I have to watch the season, and then I'm gonna have to do some research and go back and see if this is a one-off or was this always a thing that I always miss. But
I think
overall,
in time you'll have to just kind of put that pin in that and then see if it's a continuity error, because maybe they did it for just the sake of plot, or maybe it's something more. Because the only thing I've heard of in terms of other than the magic and the older vampire, and I've heard of that in some mythologies, the older you are, the longer it takes for the sun to kill you. Like that's I've heard that, but the not burning at all, no.
No, I think, and from what I think the latter point you just brought up is more along the lines of Armand, that it doesn't burn him up as quickly or as bad as other vampires. So maybe he's able to do things in the daytime that other vampires would. It's not that he couldn't fry. Like,
He can't spend as much time.
Yeah.
He can't spend that much time. And it still seems like that's possibly going to be revealed as linked to some kind of magic or something in his background, as opposed to the natural physiology of a vampire.
Yeah. But overall, I say all that to say that didn't even bother me. It was just like, oh, okay. A new interesting tidbit to get into. And again, I think this show, it's got its like cheesy moments a little bit, but not cheese to the point where I'm like turned off. Again, I was always intrigued by Anne Rice's story. Hi, there's my little daughter coming up in the back. But I think it's a really good show, a really good take on the continuation of Anne Rice's novels and the film. And I think it's worth anybody who's interested or likes vampires. I think it's worth its weight in salt to check the series out. I'm like last on the train with this. So like, again, this came out in 2022. I wasn't aware that this was out. If it was, I would have definitely been tapped in and watching it and whatnot. But I think the actors they casted are pretty good. It's good flashbacks, callbacks to the movie or the story a little bit, but not where it's not to where it's given so much what do you call it, backstory, where it's just like, oh, I'm retelling Interview with a Vampire. It's literally a continuation from years ahead of the game. So worth a watch, worth binging, and I think it'd be worth your time.
Well, I'm going to check it out. I've heard that it was good from some trusted sources, and so I'll be the last on the train, I guess. So,
and also they also premiered Mayfair Witches, I think, recently too, right? I think it's like one or two seasons.
Yeah, it's in the same universe.
Yeah, with the old girl from
Alexandria Daddario.
Yes. So I think that's 2 seasons too. AMC out here, they trying. they're like,
they're trying to get their glory back, and they're throwing all of their weight. But it's just like they threw all of their gold behind The Walking Dead, behind Kirkman. They're doing it for Anne Rice now and for her stuff.
Well, yeah, they're trying to get that. They're trying to get back the same kind of ad dollars the dough they were making off of Walking Dead, and what was the advertising show? Don Draper.
Oh, Mad Men.
Yeah, Mad Men and Walking Dead pretty much just sort of set the table for them in a different type of way from other shows that they've had. So now they're trying to reclaim that glory.
I will say this: it's not True Blood, but although I do like True Blood season 1 and season 2, but then it fell off. So if you think this is True Blood, it's not. This is one of the fair representation of Anne Rice's vision.
Well, and also to be fair, and caveat that Anne Rice and Charmaine Harris, they're not batting in the same league. I'm sorry.
No. But again,
here and Charmaine Harris, I guess those books, they're okay, but they're pulp at best.
Now.
But I'm just saying, for people maybe whose expectations like, oh, this is True Blood. No. True Blood was cool for the first 2 seasons, and it kind of jumped the shark. However, this is a totally different thing. Again, if you've read the books or if you at least watched the Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise movie, I think you'll enjoy this series, especially with the dynamic of the casting and how they tackle that in this society.
And you should also watch Queen of the Damned. I think that's required watching as well for understanding Anne Rice's universe.
I see you watching for Aaliyah, and that's the only thing I'm going to say about that.
Amen.
I concur.
Copy that.
No comment.
Josh, what have you been watching? A smattering of things.
I mean, I've been in rerun land. I've been watching original Transformers. Talking to D'Angelo kind of got me into going back to original series Trek for the first time in a really long time. Sort of seeing it through his eyes, and with his Jedi Rider training that I've been engaged in for the last couple of years. I'm definitely seeing it with different eyes.
Sith writing training. Let's not.
Sorry, Sith. My bad.
Just say Force. True. Force writings is nice and neutral.
No, it's not neutral.
Not neutral enough.
No. But yeah, I've been in rerun land lately for some strange reason. So yeah, I can't say I'm watching anything current at the moment. But yeah, it is interesting to revisit things with different eyes now. Between the just from time passing and perspective being what it is, and styles in storytelling and production have changed, coupled with, like I mentioned, sort of the lens that D'Angelo has provided over the last couple of years. Things is different. I've been reading a lot of industry news lately, and to sort of pivot away from what we've been watching for a second. And there's a lot of stuff not happening in New York and LA.
That's a conservative way to put it. It was like it's such a weird. We're already in a weird time from a global world politics side, but from now trickling back down to like the creation of things, TV and film, that's starting to kind of now be like, the COVID and then the writer strike basically killed a lot of productions in terms of just like the amount of productions. Like in New York, there would easily be at least 100 productions going on a day in New York on a regular basis, like minimum. And that's all over the boroughs, everywhere, and it's just a thing that was always there. Once,
it seems like the thing across the board is it's just cheaper to do it literally anywhere else besides the United States, and a large part of it is tax credits. LA is just getting around to like a 30% tax credit. Meanwhile, Vancouver, Budapest, freaking Thailand, like all these random ass places, they're all offering like 40% plus cash incentive, like cash back incentives. If you spend this much here, we'll hit you back with X amount of money. Like they're making it way more attractive. And New York and LA specifically, I mean the US in general, but New York and LA specifically are lagging far behind as far as that sort of thing is concerned. But they're all still with their arms in the air going, well, I don't understand why no one's filming here in the US anymore. It's just so strange, it's because it's too damn expensive.
I mean, everyone's shooting in
production costs. We're not even hitting on the fact that operations are moving away from New York and LA post production and all those things. All of it is we're just in a flux, and it's all changing, and no one can really say where it's gonna land and where it's gonna end. And AI is such a big wild card. I mean, not to go back to Black Mirror, but there's an episode where they put an actor. They're redoing old movies, and now they literally just had an actor on a set with all AI, and the actor is playing a totally different person that they're going to skin over them, and so it's like seems like
where we're at, man.
Fantasy, but it's totally a reality if some of these studios decide they want to continue to cut costs.
Yeah, well, and also
go ahead, Cam. Sorry.
Me and Josh have been talking about the rise of the micro drama And that's a lot more in Asia and starting to seep into America, but it's not there yet. But that's like horizontal 1 minute type narratives that are chopped up into they basically take a movie of an 80-minute movie and then chop it into 80 episodes because it's a minute per thing. But it's the quality. But it's the quality of freaking a soap opera.
Look, I got suckered into watching one of those.
I'm telling you, man, it sucks you in. It's not good.
No, it's terrible, but it was like enough to keep me like intrigued to like follow up with like it was like every episode was a damn cliffhanger. It was the most dumbest stuff I ever watched. I am happily ready to admit this, and it got me. Whatever they're doing, they know how to cook because it was like 60 episodes of trash, but I had to know what happened next. Like it was ridiculous. And I came out and I told my wife, I was like, yo, I watched something that I had no business watching, but it was interesting enough to keep me wanting more. And when I couldn't find it, I went on Google to search where can I find it. Was dumb. I'm like, I couldn't believe I watched this. And I was like, wow, it got me. It was just what I was bored. It caught me off guard. It caught me. It was the wrong thing that caught me at the right time, and I just kept watching.
Stars just aligned. And
I'm just telling you, man.
It never happened
you plowed
again.
through all 80 episodes.
Oh, it wasn't even 80, but it was just the example cam is like such an extreme, but it was one of those type of shows where the writing was terrible, but it was just enough to be like, I wonder what if this person's gonna get it. Let me go ahead and click the next episode. I couldn't believe I watched it. I was like, what was I doing?
I watched 78 episodes.
One individually doesn't take a lot of your time. I think that's the point.
Yeah.
It's quick.
I got it from I think it was like TikTok or something. And I thought it was like a normal, the way they did their ad, which again, smart to them, was they dropped you right into like episode 32 with whatever the cliffhanger is. And I was like, oh, what is this? I was like, oh. And then I was like, oh, it goes to the next episode. And I'm going to the next. I'm like, ooh, damn, she did that. What is he going to do? And I'm sitting there getting into it. And then I snapped myself out of it. And I'm like, wait, what? Did I watch 78? What am I doing with my life?
It's digital sorcery. That's why I haven't looked 100%. At it. I'm afraid it's going to get me.
Yo.
So wait, in both instances, both cams, did you sit down and watch it? Did you blow straight through it in a day? Or like, how long did it take you to gun through the whole thing?
This is my work shift. Like it wasn't that long. Each episode is not that long. Right. It's like you're watching a whole movie.
No, I get it. Yeah. But it's 60 episodes, so that's an hour of your time. So I'm trying to figure out, did you just burn through an hour or?
I burned through this during my 8-hour work shift, like just on and on, just watch. It wasn't 8 hours worth of content. It was just like, I had it on my phone.
Stop and start. Yeah.
That's how you curated it for yourself.
Yep.
Out that, but altogether it was 1 hour of
like it wasn't even that long. It was dumb.
Yeah, like and then for me, like I watched I think I caught one of the newer ones. So the newer ones that's where the ads in. If they have if it's like a legacy thing, you can watch the full thing without ads or anything like that because it's old. They've had it for a long time. But the one I caught was one that just came out, and so I was watching 4 episodes in a row, and then it's like, boom, hey man, you're out of credits. You got to watch the ad. I'm like, oh, it's just one ad. What do I need to do that? It's 30 seconds. I come back, I watch it a couple more. Damn it, I'm out of credits again. I was literally in a Black Mirror episode. I was like, what do I got to do to give me some credits so I can watch my show? And then
that is an episode of Black
I'm telling you, dude, it literally was
an early episode.
I need my credits so I can watch my show. I need my programs. I gotta watch my programs.
Credits equal crack. So what do I need to do to get me some more crack?
And then writing, and then like I said, production value wise, it was shot on the stage, a green screen. It was all CG or special effects for anything like action, explosions, fire, anything like that. Straight up like soap opera level of acting in terms of like the writing and how silly it was. But it was funny because the one thing I caught as I was watching it was like, okay, so this is a scene that could probably be done in 2 minutes, but you guys stretched it for 5. So now you have 5 more episodes. I was like, dude, you guys, this is really good. It's horrible, but it's good because like the way they hook you,
model and media.
I totally get it. I totally get it, and it's already big. It's big in China. It has been for a long time, for a while, and they have like their their historical dramas. They have some of the other stuff. And then now it's funny because I'm seeing similar plots I've seen in like K-dramas or any of those other overseas dramas, but in English, and it makes it even more ridiculous.
But what I'm noticing is, just to sort of take a bird's eye view of all of this, between YouTube and then streaming in a distant third place, television is about to be evaporated. Like no one, like people, as the shift goes away from terrestrial television and cable, it seems like these are the things that are taking root in a certain type of way that is basically like, I read a report the other day about how, you know, YouTube basically is valuated at something like $550 million and is the single most watched anything anywhere.
Oh yeah.
Followed very, very, I think second place is micro dramas, but second place in gaining steam. And then I think it's like tied between micro dramas and streaming, but people are drifting away from streaming because every couple of years, it seems like the price point is starting to catch up now. If you have like 5 streaming services, you basically may as well just go ahead and get cable because it's adding up to about the same thing. And, you know, and so people are, but it's not profitable for any streamer that isn't Netflix. No one's figured out how to turn their 900,000 subscribers into dough. If you're not Netflix.
Are playing both fields though. Netflix is doing it all, is all streaming all through that platform. Whereas, you know, HBO Max, they're sharing content and, you know, so there's the traditional component to it. And I think that's part of the thing that's slowing down any potential revenue, is that you still have this model and you're trying to work both ends of it, which I don't think it's working. Most of those numbers just indicate that attention spans are getting shorter and folks' patience for long form content is starting to go away. Well, at least with these newer generations, they're not watching serial dramas and TV series in that way. It's just all of it. I mean, TikTok is super popular for that reason. It's short attention span, instant gratification. But
it's also the surveys that the same article references. Basically, they're saying it's not necessarily the length of the content so much as the quality. If you have if it's not like of The Last of Us, or which is premiering tonight on HBO, unless it's, you know, as an example, if it's not one of those, if it's not an Interview with the Vampire, if it's not The Last of Us, you know, if it's not something that's quality, people aren't watching. And there's a ton of stuff on streaming that just isn't as interesting is the general judgment of the public, it would seem.
Which is very antithetical and ironic, because those microdramas, as Cam admitted, as you all admitted, are trash. And so the only thing that makes them work is the fact that is their production model and the way that they can captivate people to watch trash. Kind of the same way in the late 90s, Jerry Springer was trash, but it was one of the highest rated programs on TV. So I guess my thing is, which is it? Is it the quality or is it the length? Because it's kind of the data.
Or it's the people.
You know,
to answer that, it seems like what people are willing to indulge is, you know, kind of runs the range. You know, the younger, the one of the things that the article references is the younger the audience skews, the more bite-sized the content, the more they engage in more bite-sized content. So the microdrama thing might be for like Gen Z, Gen Alpha leaning age groups and demographics, versus us who are kind of exposed to all of it and, you know, have grown up on and up into our adult years, grown up with, come up with terrestrial television and cable. And now we're being exposed to these newer things. And so we're just wide open. We're like, yo, whatever way I need to watch it is whatever. But, someone like for example, my daughter's age, she's 25. She grew up with YouTube practically. You know what I mean? So it's less. Yeah. I think it's more. I think it seems to be skewing more towards the age range. And D'Angelo makes an excellent point. There's a book I'm reading about focus. It's called Stolen Focus. I forget the author's name, but one of the things that the author cites as impacting current day society, and particularly younger people, is the fact that the shorter, first of all, the infinite scroll is murdering our attention span. I'm a victim of that. Victim is relative because I actually chose to engage it. So victim in air quotes. But yeah, it speaks to the change in our focal points. Long form television is going away, but also it's going away in part because people don't want to watch stuff that's not good or as good. You know what I mean? And so they would rather, and so the flip side of that statement is they would rather watch 1 minute chunks in a micro drama than they would something. So a bad micro drama at that, by all accounts, versus something that's mediocre for a solid hour or a season.
Yeah. And also this goes into what's been the other book that's getting a lot of burn right now is the Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, Haidt. And basically he's saying that social media has ruined our kids' attention and focus, and how most kids, are spending, Black Mirror always on the screen, that kind of situation. And it's taken away from the focus. And, D'Angelo, he teaches in college these days. I have friends that teach in high school and other stuff, and they can attest to that. Yeah, the focus of the kids is definitely a thing, and it's definitely a factor. But there was a really good interview with the author of that book and Oprah as well. And it was interesting because they talked to parents. And so they did a 13-year-old parent with a 13-year-old, I think it was a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old. So each kid had their own levels of what addiction level of their screen time was. I think the kid that was the guy that was 15 or something, he was the one that was he takes his phone into the shower. That's how bad it was. The dopamine hit of entertainment was it was such an extreme thing, but it was definitely a thing that does happen. And so they were saying that social, because a lot of these kids now have always grown up with the screen, their attention and focus is so hard that they can't focus to read a whole book, a 5-page paper, if that, and they were just looking at just the kids, and they were saying how, for our growing up, we used to go outside and, play football or basketball or some type of a situation, right? A lot of the kids now, that social aspect has been not taken away, but they do that less. So a lot of it is a lot more and into their screen.
It actually,
again, Black Mirror
has to be planned, as opposed to when we were growing up, there was always breaks in it, usually because TV just wasn't available, or depending on who you were, what your folks' philosophy was. It's just for example, my parents had cable in the living room and in their bedroom, but my sister and we didn't have cable in our rooms. We could only watch whatever those network channels were available, and half the time they were showing reruns of stuff that was popular and we weren't even born yet. So that incentivized us to go outside and do other activities and read and things like that. But I think it's just connected to a more bigger engagement of pop culture that it has always been happening, right? Because the same complaints that were made about the MTV generation, and they're not reading as much anymore because they're too busy watching cable television, and on and on and on. But really what it is about how we have engaged in pop culture, the way that we make it more important in our lives than it actually is. And as the technology merges with that, now we can't separate those things. Social media is as much a vehicle and a tool and technology specifically driven for pop culture's machine and its existence that you can't separate them. You used to separate MTV and the television from what your children were doing, every day in their lives and things like that. But there is no separation, because guess what? As soon as they leave out the house, they still have this. So it's following, it's everywhere. Well, and we don't have a real way to put walls, especially mental walls, upon it. People don't read, and in pop culture, reading is not popular, right? Books are not popular, right?
I have a hot take.
Things like that are popular.
So let me present a caveat, because what I'm about to say is almost like the pot calling the kettle black for the famous fruit company that I work for. So I feel like we should just make public transportation much more accessible, much more prevalent to everyday commuters. Because I found, for me personally, I did most of my reading on public transportation, and I felt like, but this goes into a deeper conversation of how society views the workforce and how we have to clock in at a certain time. Like, if we could just go to work, do our shift, but not have the pressures of sitting in traffic. I personally, even when I had a smartphone, I found myself reading, but it was more since because I didn't want my phone getting taken on the BART. Like, no one gonna steal a book from me, but they'll steal your phone. But I found like,
which is its own statement.
Which is, again, goes back to what I've been saying, what I said about pop culture. Nobody's going to steal a book. That hasn't been a thing in society probably since the 19th century. So
ain't nobody coming up to me and being like, yo,
run that book, son.
Yo, run that grapes around, homie. Like,
you got that Dance of a Dragon, that new George R. Martin out here.
So
no, they ain't doing that.
But I just think there's just things like that we used to do that encouraged me to read. Like, I got a lot of reading done during my hour commute. Boom, I would knock out chapters or just sitting like I said, I challenge people to go sit like or wait in line when you're doing something, an errand, and then like if you're at the DMV, for instance, and you're waiting on your number, I would bring my book. I purposely bring my book because I do find pocket of time where I can get a couple pages in. Even when I'm taking my daughter to the park, she sometimes takes a nap in the back seat. I don't want to have the phone. I'd rather have the book. She's napping. I open up a few pages. I can probably sneak in 30, 40 minutes. That's just my mentality, because I do find myself wanting to be in the know. And when we talk about, it's kind of almost counterintuitive to what we do as a podcast, is that new show comes out. I sometimes have to scale back, and I was like, I don't need to watch that show immediately. It's going to be there. You know what I'm saying? I don't need to be in the know all the time. I have to be very selective and pick and choose like certain shows. So it's like, yeah, we do a podcast.
Unspoken thing, right?
Yeah.
The same thing and if everybody engaged, if majority of people engage pop culture in that way, it wouldn't be a problem, right? Do we need 24-hour news? No, we don't. No. But then you will have a general consensus in the crowd now that we've had 24-hour news for almost 30 years that will say, yes, it is important to have 24-hour news so that we can know everything that's happening, everything the president says, everything he's thinking when he goes to the bathroom all day long. We don't need half of the stuff that we have, and yet we have it, and it is in our lives today.
Well, it's sort of become a thing where, like, now that you have the access, you feel like you need it. When you don't necessarily need it, you want it. You've been trained, and so that's one of the things.
And you're calcified with it,
right? And so that's one of the things that the author of Stolen Focus talks about. His name is Johan Hari. Sorry about that. And he basically talks about a variety of factors that sort of yank away our focus. Just the invention of infinite scroll, where, let's say you're looking on Facebook and now it's just this unending scroll of crap, versus before when you open up a website, you would have to go page by page. A certain amount of information would load. You have to hit the next page, and then a certain amount of information would load. You look at that, you scroll up, and at some point you hit the bottom. And so that gives you an out. And that wasn't necessarily his intention to create infinite scroll that would snatch your attention. The assumption was that people would automatically just stop on their own when they've gotten to the, when they've had their fill of whatever the thing is, more an efficiency thing than an addictive additive to using the internet. But that speaks to society in general. Things speed up. Things have sped up dramatically and continue to speed up. Access is 24 hours a day to so many different things, largely at our own will. Whenever we feel like engaging social media, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, what have you, we pretty much you could spend an entire day on one of those platforms and not have to stop if you didn't want to, or if life itself didn't stop you. If Cam didn't have to take care of his daughter, if we didn't have to go to work, if I didn't have to engage with my daughter, it literally encourages you to stay with it. And so what I found and what made me read the book that I read about focus was exactly what D'Angelo was just talking about. For some reason, what I thought was some reason, just random, I don't know if it was just random or just, a shift in my thinking or my consciousness or what have you, but it's admittedly difficult for me to read a whole book. And I used to tear through books like it was nothing. Like we're having this conversation right now. It would just be me tearing through books. And what I pinpointed was sometime around COVID, when there was nothing else to do, rather than grab a book, I was online in social media way more. And that is the thing that the book talks about as the number one sort of thing that alters your ability to focus on things, on basic tasks like reading. So when we joke about people reading a lot less, it's literal and it's real. And and I don't think people really give credence to the fact that social media is legit altering the way that you pay attention.
Can I say something real quick?
Kind of like in your brain. I mean, remember, our brain is a freaking organic computer. It can be reconfigured and retaught how to think and operate.
Legit.
And that's what's happened and will continue to happen with social media, and that's also one of the points of Black Mirror. One of the themes of Black Mirror is that not only is it about the behavior, it's about how then our brain chemistry begins to think differently in accordance to this stuff.
Can I add on real quick? So part of me is like, as a Black person, there's a stigma about Black people liking grape soda, and sometimes I like to credit looking at social media, aka Twitter. It's something I do enjoy, but I also put inhibitors on me from looking at it too much. Right now, I use it for a lot of fantasy sports stuff. Like the information is very crucial for me to win. But when fantasy is over, I take a scale back. With that said, Josh, if you find somebody on Facebook doom scrolling, one, they need an intervention and they need to go out and touch grass. Facebook should not be one of those social media platforms that has you doom scrolling. But to your point, I do get that. There was moments personally where I'd wake up, grab the phone. Now I try not to grab the phone. When I did the 75 Hard Challenge, it forced me to read 10 pages a day of a book, which got me back into reading, which I credit D'Angelo for also planting those seeds and getting me back into reading certain books.
Trying to get you all into it. I read all of the Expanse in a 1 week during COVID, and I am so impressed with that because it made me want to read even more. That's 9 books, all of them 600 pages, by the way.
Bro, I looked at you like you had like an autistic ability doing that. I was like, how the hell did you do that?
Y'all don't talk to D'Angelo the way I talk to D'Angelo. When he told me that, I was like, all right. Yeah, of course he did. This is good. And he was like, no, but I read all the books in a week. I was like, yeah, you did. Like, is that weird? And
I couldn't believe it. I was
I've never done that before. Like, what?
I got through Dune, and I never thought I would read Dune. I was like, so I was like, you know what? Reading, it's not that we don't know how to read, obviously, for those who can read. It's just reading is an acquired skill. Like, you have to train yourself to read. Like, read and be coherent and read certain things and retain that information. Now, certain books, you may not, it just goes over your head. You may not be interested in. I get that. But, even reading interesting things that I would love, and I credit like me acquiring a skill to fall back in love with reading again, allow me to read Dune, The Silmarillion, and other books that were either too long-winded over my head, and actually get into the book and actually retain the information, come back and talk about books.
My man, I read Dune on a Palm Pilot. That's where I was at with reading at one point.
Yeah. And you're right. You guys, the one thing that you know is reading as we grow older, as this machine, this organic machine has its wear and tear, it becomes way more difficult to do those things. And so for like when Cam was reading Dune, and while I might read now something like Dune in no time, or I admit that that's because I don't have, when I'm reading it, it's because there's nothing that's going to stop me. I don't have anyone that's going to say, hey, stop reading. I can curate it on my own, but as an adult, that's what you kind of have to do. You got to realize you don't have a timetable. You can read one book in the full calendar year, or you can read several. Now, I've read several. I've gotten to the point where I'm able to now read several within the calendar year. I've told you guys offline of how, I usually now since 2022 have pre-ordered all of Stephen King's releases each year, and he releases at least two a year. I'm finishing up the one that he released last year just in time for the one that's about to drop on May 27th. So it's just kind of each year, it's kind of my reading since the expanse, the great expanse, pun intended, of my reading, it's just sort of continued to, even when now it's gotten to the point that when I have not read for a long time because of work or any or other life stuff, I get a little bit depressed about it, not clinically depressed or, anything like that, of that sort of mental health seriousness. But I notice when I haven't read for a long time. And again, that's happened because I've now retrained my brain to think in that way. So, I don't know if that'll work for everybody, but that's my strategy. That was my strategy. And that's what got me to this point. I got through and the Expanse was an easy one to do it because it's so well written, and it's written in a way that is a page turner. So if you're trying to get back into reading, the first thing you should start with is a page turner, something that you will actually be interested in. It could be a pulp novel. That's the other thing. You don't have to read
War and Peace
Hemingway or Faulkner, or everything that you're reading doesn't have to be like these classics. It could be anything. It's just, I think when you read, it's just like working out your brain. It's like giving your brain a good day at the gym.
Yeah, and I think the like for me, to Cam's point about transit, like I live in New York, so I take the subway pretty much every single day. And so I got to a point where, I'm on the subway with everyone else. I look around, it's crowded, this and that. But then one of the days I sat and I looked, and like literally, or figuratively, literally, everyone's phone was out. Like the kids, the adults, everybody. Like everybody had their head on the train down. Everyone had their head down with a little arch in their back. And and it was funny because I'm gonna toot my own horn, but I actually pulled my book out. And I was like looking around, and I was like, "Oh shit!" And then I saw one person with the book. I was like, "Hey, what's good, man?"
It becomes a surreal moment when you notice things like that. Because I had that happen too, where one day I looked up from my phone and realized that nobody around me was making eye contact, was saying anything. And I think I was on the subway too, but they were all looking down at either a phone screen, a laptop screen, or a tablet, an iPad, or something like that.
Yeah, and I've been trying to like for me on the train, it's been either reading or drawing. That's been the two things I've been kind of got back into the habit of doing, because the commute's about 45 minutes, something to that effect. And so that's helped me to kind of like get back into it. And then on the reading tip, I'm doing like one nonfiction, one fiction, roughly. That's like how I kind of split it up, but it's been fun to kind of do that. And I noticed the difference between having the physical book or just having the Kindle. And even the Kindle, I actually went and bought me just the baseline Kindle that's just black and gray, because I found when I had the tablet one, my focus would go other places, right? I'll be like, let me click on that thing and let me go to IMDb, which comes into the movie, which comes into
I got
the
an
TV
alert
show.
on my
ads and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So here,
it's sorcery. I told you, it's digital sorcery.
Here's my rule, and I refuse to, unless dire circumstances, I buy books, actual books. There is no ads. There is no actual distraction. I can't hold my phone and a book at the same time.
Nope.
I'm old school. Like going to a bookstore is like going to a barber to get your hair cut, right? I say that and I have all this hair. But going into the bookstore is a thing. Searching for books, asking questions, getting lost in the aisles, finding other things. It's a thing. Like, look, could I go buy a Kindle and download books? Yeah, very easy. But I like the whole approach to going and supporting your local bookstore.
Yeah.
You know, is going into that and that culture.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a culture around it.
Yeah. So like I dig that. I'm kind of old school in that. You know, I got a vinyl player behind me. Yes, I love burning music, getting music, blah, blah, blah. I was part of that culture. But I also find getting vinyl, that analog sound, there's something about that. There's something about like I can cut my own hair. Yes, it may not be cool, but I like going into the barber shop, getting that experience, and something about buying an actual physical copy of a book is just different to me. That's my rule, my own personal rule.
I agree.
Yeah.
I 100% agree.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing for that, because, you know, it keeps the social interaction part of it. And I think that's the one thing, like, say, for instance, like I love comic books. I still read comic books to this day. I've been reading comic books since I was 5. And I transitioned to digital on comics specifically because I read too much of them. And on top of that, where am I going to put it? I live in New York. Space is limited. But for like, and same with books. I love my books. I have a great art library, but a lot of it's packed up in boxes because I didn't have the physical space for it. So then I had to calm down a little bit. But to Cam's credit, I started to buy books again, get to that point, because then I had I had the stack. I'm like, oh, here's my queue. All right, let's start with the first one and go read into it, and I can put it to the next queue. This is the ones I've read. These are the ones I need to read. And it helped as a visual reminder to kind of be like, oh man, I got to get back on it. And it's been kind of fun to kind of get to that level. But also, I think the action of that, like Cam said, going into a bookstore, asking questions, like finding a nerd that knows a lot about that subject and then nerding out with them about that and going back and forth. Same thing with art, and same like art is another thing where we're doing, you know, AI is a big deal right now. Everyone's talking about it, blah, 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 blah. But my school still teaches how they teach digital art and physical art, right? We learn how to paint and draw and acrylics, oils and pastels, but then we still use those same skills on an iPad and use Procreate and all these other tools. So I think there is something to be said about still keeping the connection to the physical and to that social interaction, because I think all the books that we're talking about, a lot of that anxious energy and unfocusing, it all comes back down to that social interaction. People don't have that anymore. And a lot of the interviews about the authors and the books themselves were saying that. They're like, you know, specifically for like, I've been in social media as a job since social media has been around. And so for me, I entered social media as like, oh, this is my job, and then this is real life. Cool. And I've kept that mode pretty much all through now. But most people, when they enter social media, it's all intertwined to one. So when someone's like, yo, did you hear what Kanye said today? I'm like, no, I didn't look at social for all day. I didn't even like pay attention, you know, like, but
nowadays,
I can see that,
honestly, if I see something on social media, I'm not likely to believe it until I do some research on my own. Like,
and that's a good thing.
I receive on social media, I'm like, yeah, that's probably not true. Then I have to go back and find out on my own, because it's just gotten to that point.
You look, I'm 76-year-old. Reading has made me look like a 30-year-old. That's it.
Hey,
I think at the end of the day, I think that's, you know, the mix of understanding the separation between the reality and what's put on their screens, but then also, like Cam says, go and touch grass and doing those things. Like,
yeah,
I was
you want one, but not at the expense of the other. We don't mind innovation and there being convenience of this device that you can put all these book titles on, but like at the expense of a library in society, or that kind of collection of because to me, books are the most important. Books and written things are some of the most important things that we have as humans, that allow us to talk to each other across space and time. And so if you only have that in one source, then you're quickly the same with the art. Like, you don't just want to do digital art, you want to do physical art too. You don't want that to be lost.
Well, I think also that alongside that, we have a situation where, like, cycling back to the microdrama thing, in so much as it's an interesting diversion, it's part of the problem, unfortunately. Attention spans and ability to focus have cycled down to the point where that's literally where we are in terms of disseminating information. It has to be bite size. It has to be a 30-second video. It has to be a 1-minute video. And, it's one of those things where, like, you have to, there was in the book that I was talking about, Stolen Focus, one of the things that they present is the debate between, for example, notifications on your phone. There are so many things that tug at your attention on your phone. And on the one hand, one of the experts that was interviewed for the book was saying, well, you can turn those off, right? And the author's counter was, why should we have to? Like, why do we even have those things to begin with that are tugging at our attention? And so, there's talk about multitasking and how, that's a fallacy, and it's a sort of a byproduct of computers being able to multitask. And so we move now into a period where people are expected to function like computers, and how unrealistic that is, because computers can parallel process. People can't.
But it also isn't actually pushing for us to physically evolve to do that. It's like, okay, the tech can do it for you because like now it's not trying to get us to process things faster. It's simply trying to get our attention from one thing to the next. And that's
it's basically the Cliff Notes of everything. Cliff Notes is everything now. Back in the day, when you say you Cliff Notes, and even the term Cliff Notes is like, kids don't even know what that is, but they're living it now. And
with everything.
And my friend was saying, I come from a time where you mention Cliff Notes to a professor or to someone of the academic world, they're like, what?
You might fail the class just for mentioning.
Exactly, just for mentioning that.
And now that's almost the norm, right? Hey Siri, give me the rundown on Ernest Hemingway's best 5 best novels, and then they give you the little Cliff Notes version, quote unquote Cliff Notes, and then you keep it moving. And
A Tale of Two Cities in 2 minutes.
Yep.
ChatGPT summarize Tchaikovsky's War and Peace.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Summarize War and Peace for me in a paragraph.
And now it's like, now it's multiplied into all the other forms, right? Songs are getting shorter. People are, you'll look at a lot of songs. Long songs used to be, 3, 4, 5 minutes. Now they're like about 2:10, 2:20 at most. Songs over 3 minutes. And people are like, whoa, dude, they're making songs for these things.
Remember the band in the Battle of the Bands in Scott Pilgrim versus the World, where the band played like 10-second songs? That's a thing. Like, I was at Afropunk a few years ago with my daughter, and there was a band that specialized in like 30-second to 1-minute songs. I mean, they were killing it. Don't get me wrong, but that's a thing. That's an actual thing that musicians aspire towards, which is bananas. Man. But again, it speaks to the speeding up of society and how we just seem to be making. We're either it's divided in two things. In my observation, it's either 24-hour access to a thing or bite-sized chunks of a thing.
Yeah, what's it called? I saw a term because that's the other thing about this quote unquote this generation is we are old heads now. They have to label everything that already had things. So like I saw this thing where like, yeah, you know, the rise of slow hobbies. And I was like, what the hell is like? And they were like, nah, it just means that you basically you pick a hobby that you have to take time to learn. And I was like, so learning a craft?
I was gonna say,
I was so confused.
Yeah,
and I was reading the whole article.
Colloquial phrase for that, like that's
it's part of it. Part of it is pop culture, going back to what you said before. But the other thing is trying to relabel things that's already been a thing, right?
Good
like
Lord.
The one thing I noticed about with the interview with the anxious generation and some of the kids is none of the kids had hobbies. Like they went to school, they had their friends, they had their social media and their phones, and that was it. None of them talks about anything that they did that wasn't tied to school or to their phone. And
that makes me think stuff. Yeah.
And so like, you know, they might have a lot of opinions, but those opinions are shaped by TikTok or they're shaped by, you know, whatever social thing that is their thing, right? Whether it's Snapchat or whatever it is. But so they're, you know, they have their Twitter fingers are pretty sharp, but when they talk in person, they're very like they talk quietly and they look down and they can't hold eye contact or they can't because again they didn't have these they didn't have the time to develop these social skills, and I think that's the other aspect of it.
If I have to ask my 25-year-old daughter one more time to speak up, I'm going to jump out a window. We were at a restaurant last Saturday, and this child is just like mumbling practically. There's loud music. It's a Black people restaurant on a brunch day. So you already know what it is. It's just, you know, it's loud, you know, people.
I just had a flashback and you're totally right. It's loud, but it's a fun environment. But
it's great. I'm by no means am I deriding it. It's
no, I know.
It's amazing. It's a party basically. But if you're not participating in that, you're probably talking over your meal. And this child just would not talk over the music without some sort of prompting, which just absolutely makes me want to put my hands on my behind and just throw myself out a window.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that's the thing where one of the authors made that point. He was basically like, you know, a lot of these social skills you would learn when you're younger because you had to, right? You're with a group of friends. We're all playing basketball. And then you're starting to learn about different things or, you know, he used girls as an example, how, you know, younger girls form bonds with each other in terms of best friends and all that by sharing secrets and that kind of stuff. But now in this hyper connected world, you know, by 12, 13, they're already on social media. They're already getting compared for their physical appearance and what they say and how they do. And everything's scrutinized to the nth degree. So there is no time to fail and learn things because you're already starting to have almost an avatar of yourself before you can actually be authentic anymore. And even being authentic is like another thing that's not good. Like it's just every small thing that you can think of, someone's commodified it. Someone has like put a label on it, repackaged it. I remember the last thing I'll say is it was the term poser, and the guy was like, it was a video social it was on Instagram and TikTok, but basically he was talking about a poser. But the way he was making it, and he had like a different term for it. And it's like, yeah, you don't really need to learn deeply about any one thing. You could just learn just very surface level things so you could easily, you know, change with different people that you talk to. And I was just like, that's a poser. Like there's no one else sees a poser. And I was looking at the comments and other people, Gen X pretty much chimed in. They were like, no, guy, that's a bad thing, actually. Like pick something that you like, be about it. And it doesn't matter whether anyone else is, but you'll find your people, right? You're into punk, you'll find your punk people. You're into comic books, you're into whatever you are, you can find your peoples. But like, yeah, you got to have like, be about something, you know? And so again, all of it means to say is where a lot of these social interactions and like that real life stuff that we used to, that we now see was super important for our development and growth is not around as much anymore for a lot of younger kids. And so I'm glad that at least people are starting to like see it and now trying to figure out ways to combat it and kind of go from there.
and the kids are not lost, right? Because all you need to do is
They're
set
smart.
foot inside
Very smart
of
kids.
Comic-Con.
Very intelligent.
Yeah, and all you gotta do is just set foot inside of Comic-Con, and there's communities of kids who find the one thing that they like. They cosplay, they eat up anime like a lawnmower now. You know what I mean? To the point where they study Japanese, or they know how to sing the song in Japanese with flawless diction. You know what I mean? So, the comic book kids are still comic book kids the same way we were. So, society's not lost. It's just, there are some worrisome things that are at play. I hate to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but there are legit forces, like actual forces at play, that if people don't know how to, or learn how to, or exercise their ability to have a little bit of discretion around what they do, how much they consume. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't, and that was the thing that the book that I mentioned sort of is resolving itself to. I'm still reading it, but I can tell it's resolving itself to, you have to exercise a certain amount of discipline and discretion in terms of A, how much you consume, B, the way that you're consuming it, C, the vehicle that you're consuming it through, and then D, being able to disengage.
Yeah, that's the big one. All right, so
we don't want you to disengage from the podcast, though.
Just one. No, don't disengage from the podcast. You actually might learn something. But
there you go.
One quick thing, and that is based on what was just said, and what we've all been saying, is that the problem is you have a generation that has this technology and all of these things, and they're not mature enough to handle it, and that in and of itself creates a problem for the future. And so that is what I worry about in terms of how society is currently engaging pop culture, social media, and all of the other technology that has been made inseparable from it all. So I think that is where we are, is it, because you're right, you do need that discipline. You do need to be able to yourself pull away from it, but that requires maturity. And so now that the technology is leaped beyond, now the maturity has to catch up. And we, as we know, once it catches up, there will be something else that has already supplanted it. And we have another generation that doesn't know how to play with it. And again, we're getting out ahead of being able to engage these things in a more mature way. I think that's the bigger issue. But and in that case, it's not lost. It'll just take time and enough people to bring us along.
Yeah. And with that, I'm gonna leave it right there, because that was great. As always, thanks to everybody for rocking with us. Go read a book, go touch grass, put your phone down, maybe listen to some jazz and just veg out for a little bit. Go daydream, do all those little things. But as always, this is Blerdlines, and we are out.
Peace.